Completed a leadership certificate program at the Humanist Institute in 2009. He became a certified leader by the American Ethical Union in 2010. Prior to becoming an ethical leader, Hugh taught philosophy and history for 25 years in several Washington, D.C. independent schools, where he created second-level courses in ethics and in history of public service. Hugh organized and led social service and diversity programs and contributed leadership to the advancement of pre-college philosophy through the American Philosophical Association. In the mid-1990s, Hugh became involved in ethical culture, serving the Washington Ethical Culture Society as a board member between 2002 and 2006. In his last year with the Washington Ethical Society, he served as president and as director of the Coming of Age program from 2009 to 2011. The Coming of Age program is designed to build positive parent-child relationships and nurture maturation of teens. In addition to serving as a leader of the Ethical Humanist Society of Philadelphia, Hugh serves as a leader at the Baltimore Ethical Society. He is also a faculty member of the 2012 American Ethical Union Lay Leadership Summer School. He's a consulting leader with the Ethical Society Without Walls and is the secretary of the National Leaders Council of the American Ethical Union. Although Hugh was raised in a secular environment, his great-grandfather was United States President William Howard Taft. And William Howard Taft was a Unitarian. Howard Taft was the only United States president to also serve as president of a religious organization, the General Conference of Unitarian Churches, from 1915 to 1925. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome a man with a sincere desire to better the world, promote community, and whom I'm proud to call my dear friend, Hugh Taft-Morales.
Thank you, that was way too much, way too much, way too much. How many people heard James Croft this morning speak? I'm not going to use JT's description, but... So instead I'm going to start with a joke. This guy, he was a boozer, misbehaving, spending money wildly, running around, living the high life, and finally things are getting bad. He needs money, he steals money from his family, he finally uses the last $2 on a lottery ticket and wins $1 million. And he's going, yeah baby, and he's walking down the street and this gust of wind takes the ticket away. And he can't see it anywhere. And he looks up and he said, God, please, this one time, if you just help me find that ticket, I promise I won't booze anymore, I'll be good, I'll be uprighteous, I'll be moral. And then suddenly he looks and there's the ticket down on the ground. He says, never mind, I got it. I think that's some of the way that I approach religion. It's necessary sometimes when you really need it, and when you don't need it, you throw it away. But one of my favorite movies is The Life of Brian, and I'm going to tell you a story from that. But first, let me ask: how many people here have been to an Ethical Culture Sunday program? How many people have been here? Okay, all right, so a fair amount of people. Not a lot of people know what ethical culture is about. It's a 140-year-old movement. Felix Adler was the founder of it, and he wanted a replacement for traditional faith institutions because at the time that he founded the New York Society for Ethical Culture, which was 1876, religion was on the downswing, and he didn't see where ethics was going to stick around because what he saw was the devastation of the Gilded Age, children in mines that was mentioned earlier, the devastation of Native American populations, and so on. So he wanted a place for the basic ethical messages of the great religions like the Golden Rule, or something like that, to exist without the theistic nonsense. So he founded the ethical culture movement. Now, he wanted to use reason and knowledge and history and science to build a community in which we could support ethical living and support each other in that effort. Now, one of our strengths in ethical culture is that we're a 140-year-old movement. And one of our weaknesses is that we're a 140-year-old movement. because it requires that when you're around that long, you really have to reinvent yourself over and over and over again. So what James was talking about, what JT was talking about, what many people were talking about earlier today, was about how do we come into modern times bringing basically wisdom that we all have from long times ago into the modern era in a way that can be effective, connecting with a larger population. And that really requires adaptation, growth, and a rebirth. And so I think ethical culture is beginning to do that. And that's a joy to see. We have to do it more effectively. So, back to the life of Brian. How many people have seen that movie? Yeah, I figured. So the hero, the soon-to-be deified and then crucified protagonist, Brian, wants to quit his job because he's working selling grotesque Roman food at the Colosseum, and he wants to join a rebel group. So but what happens to him is he encounters something typical of many anti-authoritarian groups, this tendency to splinter off into various competing factions, which is something that we're dealing with in this movement. So he's confronted with infighting between the People's Front of Judea, the Judean People's Front, and somebody got it. Right. The Judean Popular People's Front. That's right. You have way too much time on your hand, but that front actually consists of one person as well. So a couple of years ago, New York Times columnist Jonathan Chait wrote on how on target Monty Python was in that film. And he talked about psychologists who theorized that this is due to a tendency on the left to want to express your individuality, as compared to a tendency on the right to want to be a team player. So that's one reason why I think the religious right has been so effective in that regard. I see that tendency in many progressive groups throughout history, rebellious groups, where you can just look at, anarchists and socialists and communists, each with their own t-shirt and agenda. You can look at various, Dave Barry wrote a column about the 1968 Democratic Convention demonstrations. He said it was, quote, like spokespersons for about 253 major ideological factions, each giving each other the finger through a cloud of tear gas. It was about that effective. You also see it, though, in the splintering of the Occupy movement, which really only a year ago seemed poised to lead us on a revolution against the 1%. But they couldn't hold it together. And so this is a challenge that I think confronts us here, this assembled collection of rebellious freethinkers. We have to be one of the most anti-authoritarian groups in the world, I believe, and goodness bless us, right? So we got atheists, we have agnostic, secularists, humanists, freethinkers, skeptics, non-believers, and devotees of flying spaghetti monsters. This herd of cats, the fact that most of us, not all of us, there's some still wandering the halls, but most of these cats are in this one room is really a testament to the organizing ability of Margaret and Brian and all the others, Scott and Sachs and Stacks. And so thank you for getting this herd of cats together. What's going on in the outside world right now? Well, clearly, it's been talked about. We see a rise in the percentage of non-believers, while at the same time, we see a rise in activities of dangerous religious fanatics. We see skeptics and secularists searching for meaning, but at the same time, we see intolerant theocrats seizing political power. So it's really a time that we really have to get our act together more than ever. The time is now, I think. Now, what I want to contribute, because a lot of what I wanted to say has been said, but I want to focus on the fact that I do not think coming together means you have to give up your unique identity as an individual or as an organization. In fact, my main point is that when you get together with other people to work on goals that you share, we can actually help each other define what makes each group unique. And that's incredibly important. Not to give up your uniqueness when you're working in collaboration. It takes time, it takes trust, it takes relationship building skills, which, by the way, does not come with you when you're born. It's hard work to build relationships, and we have to learn how to get to know each other well. And when we do, and when we cooperate on unity and community, we can do great things. Like, for example, March 24th, 2012, what was it?
Reason Rally.
That's right. Down in Washington, how many went to that? All right. Now, that was a great thing. And I think that this, I mean, given the fact that that was the largest explicitly secular gathering in U.S. history, is that right? Is that what's largest explicitly in world history, David? Thank you, thank you. Yeah, you shoot high, don't you? It was full of music and humor and speeches, and it generated a lot of energy. More energy than I had felt since hearing President Obama in his first inaugural speech mention the word non-believers. Wow. Now, a few months after the recent rally, I was disappointed at the second inaugural, because I had my little sheet there, I was going to write them down. The president didn't once mention non-believer, or atheist, or humanist, or freethinker, but he did manage to speak of a gift from God, the eyes of God, his oath to God, the planet being given to us in our care by God, and he concluded the whole damn speech again with God bless you, and may he forever bless these United States of America. I know he means well, but he could at least have used the female pronoun, right? He. So, back in March of 2012, I really enjoyed the reason at rally. It was this coming out of the closet movement, it was called. The marcher holding the sign, I love to say, "Hi Mom, I'm an atheist." You know, that's wonderful. Fred Edwards chanting, "We're here, we're godless, get used to it." Great messages. Now, I'll admit, though, that I felt a little bit, by the end of the day, I had questions about where I fit into this beautiful, godless rainbow coalition. And the reason I was trying to figure it out was partially because I was new to this. I taught high school for 25 years, and I'm just really beginning to know you all, the groups, and the movement. Now, personally, I identify very closely with the terms skeptic, agnostic, naturalist, non-theist, and freethinker. None of them capture all of me, and that's the problem with labels. How many labels capture any of us, right? I also feel very close to the term atheist in that I don't think God exists. And if that's what you mean, that's what I am. But I do sometimes say, yeah, but my skepticism doesn't allow me to say that I'll never run into evidence that makes me think that maybe there's a divine intelligence. But at the moment that seems so unlikely, I'm not going to waste my time that I have on this earth looking for that evidence. But, so sure, I'm an atheist, that's fine. But the term I identify most closely with is humanist. And at times, here's where I might get into trouble, at times I even identify as a religious humanist. Now, many ethical cultures, yeah, there's no woo in it, don't worry, but many ethical cultures and ethical humanists do not consider their affiliation to be a religious one. But my personal sense of religious humanism flows out of traditions of the Greeks, the Enlightenment, the birth of American democracy, but most recently out of Felix Adler and the founding of ethical culture. It embraces reason, it rejects all supernaturalism, and it fits in well with Humanist Manifesto 1, 2, and 3. So what's the part of my humanism that is religious? Well, one answer comes from the 1957 U.S. Court of Appeals ruling that said ethical societies are religious legally because they act like religious societies. They do these weekly meetings, they sometimes have Sunday school, they do marriages and funerals, they do social service and social justice projects. Most importantly, they engage in seasonal and life transition ceremonies within a congregational context. In other words, they get together and they stay together through the ups and downs of life. Now, many non-believing groups are seeking something like this, and you see it more and more and more, and that's fantastic. It's been something ethical culture has been trying to do for the last 140 years. Now, another reason I sometimes will explain the religious humanist tint of my beliefs, and believe me, I've got much more secular humanism in my approach to life, but there are times where I connect with what John Dewey talked about in his book, A Common Faith. And there he uses the term religious as an adjective. He says that it's basically describing experiences of harmony and wholeness and engagement. And ethical culture's brand of humanism strives to provide that to people who want those sorts of experiences in a congregational format. And they can come in many different types. They can be aesthetic, they can be ethical or scientific or political or social, but not supernatural. Okay? Now, I think to a degree you can see a lot of these. I recommend, if you're interested in this, you look at Elaine de Botton's book, Religion for Atheists, or Andre Comte Spoonfield's The Little Book of Atheist Spirituality, Or Bob Solomon's, my favorite, is The Spirituality for the Skeptic, partially because I have a philosophy background. But all those books sort of offer you ways to engage in that sort of connection. Now, I fully accept that many of you may not accept either of my explanations for including the term religious in describing my humanism. In fact, some of you may see it as evidence that I am a splinterer, worse than the Judean Popular People's Front. I accept that. You may say, Hugh, you can get married, do community service, and enjoy communal celebrations and the passages of the seasons without using the term religion. And you may say, Hugh, I also can feel harmony and wholeness and engagement, and I don't use the word religious. And I say, that's great, that's fantastic, and that's important. We non-theist, skeptical rationalists need as much community and connection and those feelings of wholeness as we can get. And to me, community and connection are much more important than what vocabulary we use to fit ourselves. But for some non-theists, the R word works. For others, it does not. In ethical humanism, what matters the most is not the words we use, but the life we lead. And what matters is what our bumper sticker says, deed before creed. So the bald little headed guy who founded ethical culture, Felix Adler, we don't bow down to him. He was trying to do something that was new, radical in the world. I consider him as radical as Ingersoll and what he was trying to do at the time. He tried to put the matter of religion or not to rest. I quote him over and over and over again the following. He said, the ethical movement is religious to those who are religiously minded and who interpret its work religiously, and it's simply ethical to those who are not so minded. Period. Move on. It's our work that matters the most, not the words. We're working for a more compassionate society where people are empowered to bring out their best as individuals and as members of groups. The question is, are we all serving the dignity and respect that every individual deserves? Now, these grandiose rhetorical questions may be of interest to some of you, as they are to me. They're not really the focus of this conference. This conference is focused on unity and community. And I think that's what we need, in my mind, for us to accomplish those other goals. I believe that this theme of how we herd our cats better, how we coordinate better, and on how do we, is really something about where do we agree. It wasn't without some controversy. Remember I said, I don't think joining coalitions makes you surrender your identity, and that in fact, it helps you clarify your identity. In a lot of ways, that's what happens in personal relationships. When you get involved with somebody else, if you enter that relationship without being sure who you are, that relationship can become destructive. You can get involved in codependency. You complete me. If you know who you are, and if you are working in a relationship with another person, you must be sure who you are in order to honor who that other person is. And you shouldn't sacrifice that identity for the other person, and they shouldn't sacrifice it for you. So I see it working that way. We have to emphasize where we agree while being who we are. And again, that takes time and trust and relationship building. Now, I began to know this spectrum of humanists and atheists relatively late in life, when I began training in ethical culture. And I began to feel the connections when I joined my leadership training group and the Humanist Institute. How many people here have graduated from the Humanist Institute? Just a couple of hands. How many know of the Humanist Institute? Okay, great. Find out more about it. It's important. It was a part that really got me connected. I got to know Warren Wolf and Fred Edwards and Kristen Wintermute. And I began to learn how to bring people together. Now, Fred Edwards is somebody that I think does that as well as anybody. His work with the Coalition of Reason is drawing people together in cities across the country. Where I work at both Philadelphia and Baltimore and the ethical societies there, our ethical societies have benefited from joining core and networking more. And that has really made a difference. Sometimes there's controversy about joining a big coalition because you're afraid of losing your identity. And I understand that. But I argued before we joined in Baltimore that really that identity, your own self-knowledge, can be enhanced through those relationships. And if organizations create relationships that are candid and respectful, you can enhance the uniqueness of both in the party. And you can identify your common work much more. So the test is, can you identify, clarify your own identity at the same time working towards shared goals? And I've had a lot of experience in the last 2 years where the answer is, of course, of course. So, I want to talk for the rest of my talk just about a few of the projects that we've been involved with. When I started working at the Ethical Humanist Society in Philadelphia, I was new to the city. I was lucky to have one of the best guides to the skeptic seas of Pennsylvania, Margaret Downey. She introduced me to the various area heathens and the growing coalition, movers and shakers. I got to meet Richard Dawkins through her. But what was best about working with Margaret was her combination of self-assuredness. Is that an understatement? Self-assertiveness, maybe? But the combination of that with her ability to make relationships that are mutually beneficial. And that's what has brought us together today. So I want to give you a round of applause, Maureen. At the very first event that we collaborated all on down at Rittenhouse Square at the Ethical Society, we packed the hall for Lawrence Krauss, who was touting his book, A Universe from Nothing. And our two organizations, we shared a respect for reason and science and skepticism, which he gave fully to the 200 people that packed in. And many of those 200 found out for the first time about the Free Thought Society and the Ethical Humanist Society in our introductions of Krauss. So that was an important example. This past year, we've organized diverse discussions about church and state hullabaloos with Jay Wexler, and uncovering the Good News Club with Catherine Stewart, and exposing sexual repression with Jill McDevitt. And my favorite evening was when we hosted Roy Zimmerman, who, I don't know how many people know him. A great progressive singer-songwriter of pointed parodies about religious and political intolerance. Get him. Margaret has the contacts, we had the space, and together we've had some great programs. So that collaboration was wonderful. She also had a tree of knowledge, which became an orphan when the Westchester County Courthouse refused to allow her to put it up. We had the space, a nice part in our foyer where a 14-foot tree could go, and various members could hang the covers of their favorite free-thinking books. Now, an interesting thing, the first year I actually talked to Margaret about how there was a little sort of adjustment we had to do, because the first time we put up the tree, the various book covers were of the more aggressively atheist point of view, perhaps, and some of our members, but Margaret encouraged our members to bring their own books, and so we began to put up more books, and pretty soon the tree represented the shared values of the two organizations. So you do have to work through these things and have these conversations. The nice thing about it was what we got out of it. We had a lot of fun. We got on National Public Radio that morning. We got a newspaper story in a local paper, and we got more people showing up than ever. So again, the collaboration works. That same potential is brewing in the Philadelphia Coalition of Reason. For those of you who show up at the Unity Picnic, I see a growing energy there, thanks to Stax Roche and others. Same potential in Human Light. Where's Patrick? Human Light, right there. See Patrick Carlucci about the Human Light, the December holiday celebration. That, I think, is an important way to come together and build community. We did that last year at Rittenhouse Square with the Humanist Association of Greater Philadelphia. In Baltimore, mainly thanks to Emil Volchek. Emil, just raise your hand there, president of the Ethical Society. Emil has been incredible at organizing the Coalition of Reason in Baltimore, and there as well, we hosted Human Light for a couple of years. We had Roy Zimmerman come and play. We had a whole host of Darwin Day events. We helped support the LGBTQ Humanist Council that the AHA has started at Baltimore. Dale McGowan's presentation of Parenting Beyond Belief. Sean Faircloth came and talked about Attack of the Theocrats at UMBC as a part of a core event. And so all these things are occurring. Back in Philadelphia, I found a lot in common with Ed Joyce and the Delaware Valley chapter of America's United for Separation of Church and State. We've had panel discussions. I've served on their clergy advisory board. Just this past Thursday, the Thinking Society and the Ethical Society joined up, and we had an overflow registration for a class on the art of living. We're co-hosting a series of adult sex ed classes. It's not what you think. with the First Unitarian Church of all partners. We share our building with Amnesty International and work with them in Occupy Philadelphia. Next week, on Saturday, I'll be singing peace songs with the Granny Peace Brigade on Rittenhouse Square. And not a one of these coalitions has led to an identity crisis, for me personally or for our organizations, because it's a chance to be clear with your partners in that. It's a chance to share what makes you unique and where we agree on concerns and values and goals. So I believe that there's much more that we have to work on together to conclude the basics: reason, science, separation of church and state, freedom of conscience. The quest for community is going to serve all of those efforts together. So I'm thrilled about this conference and the potential it holds for closer collaboration and deeper relationships as I get to know all of you and all your organizations better. They won't grow, however, without the time and the care and, frankly, the humility that it takes to develop good relationships, the openness, the willingness to listen. So I thank all of you who have reached out, who have both helped me learn more and listen to what I've had to say, and I promise to work for the next, certainly, few years in my life trying to make sure that in Pennsylvania there are a multitude of unique, skeptical, atheist, and humanist organizations that will serve all of Pennsylvania's skeptics. So thanks a lot.